continue.
All right. So, welcome to Confidence Theatrics Reclaiming the Canon Parade. And with us today to dig into this amazing piece of theatrical history, we have Marquis Fair, B.
Hello.
Johnson, TJ Lucasina, and, well, there's me. So, I kind of always start these with just some historical context and kind of backdrop to things, and then we'll just spark conversation. And this is not rehearsed, it's very open. We're just talking about this piece and what it means, whether it's to us or how we relate to it. You'll see. Just watch. So, with that, I want to go into one of the first quotes that I found that I liked, which is by Jason Robert Brown. Is he said this pretty much a month after it opened on Broadway, which would have been in 1999. Well, it opened in 1998, but a month after would be 1999. He said, "The show is courageous in a lot of ways to me. I think the subject matter, but also theatrically, the way we do it is fairly courageous. We keep saying it's wrapped up in a love story, but it's far from a conventionally told piece of theater. That interested me, and I want theater to be special." So I found that interesting, considering that in the same article as I was reading, which was the New York Times, 5 years later, was this quote: "I can look back at Parade, which I'm enormously proud of on an artistic level, and see decisions we could have made that would have let the audience into the show more without compromising what we accomplish artistically. We very much were writing Parade in an ivory tower place."
Hmm.
I don't know if it's because of everything that happened within the past year, but that quote right there struck me because you have pretty much a composer saying, "Yeah, we wrote this from one lens."
So I'm just gonna say something about that real quick. I think that first of all, good for him for saying that, whatever. But also, I think that the same could be said about pretty much a lot of theater in general. I mean, you write a piece at the time that it is, and then maybe a few years later, you try to it tries to stay evergreen. But depending on when it was written, it will eventually become sort of dated, depending on the piece of theater. Even things that pieces of theater that are considered classics or very much like the gold standard. You got your Les Mis, you got your Rent, you got your whatever the other shows are. They're often you look back at them, you're like, where are the black people, or why are they putting them in such a bad light, or what happened to the women in this show? Whatever the things are, you look back and you're like, this is a little problematic, but the show still, depending on the show, it generally, if the show is good, the message still stands. So that's just my 2 cents.
And that's a good 2 cents. That's a good 2 cents to have.
My pair of pennies, as I'm starting to say.
So, but with that, and one of the reasons that we're doing this talk is because Marquis loves the show.
Yes.
Why?
So so here's the thing, right? Um, right. So for those of you who don't know, I have a podcast called So Here's the Thing. So that's
Yeah, I know, which is
a
why I
little
giggled.
chuckle between the people who were on the call and those in the know. So anyway, the thing about this show, a couple reasons. One, I have a personal connection to it. I was introduced to Parade almost about 9 years ago, and I met some really great, fantastic people in the cast. It was my one of my first introductions back into musical theater that really made me feel like I could dance and you know and look okay on stage. But more so, it was one of the first musicals that I was exposed to, that I really wanted to do a little bit more research on, and it explored race in a way that was dark and interesting to me. And it never occurred to me that, well, very rarely occurred to me that something like a murder um, of a child and the racial implications of the sort of conviction of the supposed killer could be put in a musical in such a way. So just creatively, I thought it was a great show. Um, I think the music's great. I think that it's some of the pieces are sort of toe tapping to me, but also I think that it was one of the first shows that, as I said before, um, musicals that inspired me to be like, you know what? I wish that somebody would do a show about Black people being murdered. Hmm? And how no, seriously,
No,
like if
no,
you
I
could
get it. Strange line of connection, but okay.
listen, and that's my thing. That's my sort of lens to be like, you know what? If there were a show, a musical about Eric Garner or Trayvon Martin or anybody, the George Floyd, which is where we are now, it would be very interesting and compelling, particularly when you add in this sort of mob mentality and the media. If you have like a social media aspect of today and people just sort of going and running with it, I think that it'll be very interesting. So from the time that I did it to today, Parade still is in my mind. It keeps my head spinning in a lot of different ways. And I'm going to stop there to let other people say something.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that. When you said that line, that connection is weird, it's not really that weird because in the opening of Act Two, a Rumbling and a Rolling, they ask the same question on stage to the audience. They say if a little black girl was hung in a tree, where would anybody be coming down for this? Like,
right.
So I mean, they put it out there like, if this show were to be done, essentially you could connect it that if this show were to be done with that in mind, or with that being the subject, would it sell?
Right.
I mean, Parade wasn't a huge success.
No.
It's
Only
not
84 performances and 39
That's it.
previews. Yeah.
Mm.
It opened and shut quickly because they got really, really bad reviews. So there are articles on top of articles about how critics tanked this show. And if
Yeah.
and Jason Robert Brown, or maybe it was Yuri, that said if they had received one good review, the show would have run for years.
Oh wow. Mm.
I don't know about that, but I get the concept. Like they got five bad reviews, so they got
Yeah.
tanked. But if they had
Yeah.
gotten a good one, somebody else might have jumped on the bandwagon of liking it. B, what do
To
you
go
think?
back,
'Cause you and
I was
I
just going
are.
to say, yeah, no, to go back to what Marquis was saying, it's incredibly the connection. So last year in Georgia, Ahmed Aubrey was lynched. Like
Mm.
this literally is still happening. This
Mm-hmm.
isn't a thing of the past. This is a thing that is still happening.
Right.
So I definitely think that that line between this and producing a musical that shows Black people being killed, like that is a very strong line, and it is very relevant, and it is very much something that can be addressed.
So one other thing about I mean, I could go on and on about why I love the show, but there are so many musicals. So I would probably say the majority of musicals are not based on anything historically, right? It's sort of almost all musicals are fictionalized. I would say not almost all, but more than half. I'll say it that way. More than half of
Okay.
musicals are fictionalized. And so to take something that historically happened and to form it into a musical artistically, again, I love it. I love the idea. I think that it was really well executed. Well, the show that I was in, I don't know about the rest of these shows, but the show that I was in was really great. So yeah, I'll stop there.
So with that, and now I'm gonna ask questions about some of the known problematic histories that I found through my research and stuff. Since you have done it, and
Mhm.
I and TJ, you've seen it, and I think B and I are on the we have no idea what this is. Um, how did you deal with one of the complaints that I read was how the script takes major liberties with racial slurs?
So, couple things. The first, at the time, and probably still today, particularly as I've grown as an actor and just artistic creator, I have some strong sort of opinions about when and if racial slurs can be used in art in general. And I think that particularly because this is based on a historic piece, I mean, a piece of history, and it's trying and to my mind successfully makes a point, and it's supposed to give a little bit of a shock value, and it's not just for the sake of shock. There's a reason that the slurs are used in the ways that they are used throughout the show. Parade, to my mind, gets a little bit of a pass on that particular thing.
Okay.
That being said, there are many shows even today that I've been in that, you know, the N word is thrown around for no reason. People are called, I mean, and not just black people. I mean, from
On both
Jewish
sides.
people, Asian people, it's all across the spectrum. People sort of throw it in there just to make the audience gasp. But for this particular thing, there's a reason that that slurs like that are so charged, and particularly for those people in the South at that particular time, because it lends to the entire narrative, to my mind.
Not
Okay.
just at that particular time, but yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think piggybacking off of that, I definitely it's one of those where when you hear it, you're always off put. But this is a moment where it really is the motivation for when you get to the hate at the end and the mob lynching. And it's a big, like, you wanted to see everybody like jumping right on that and agreeing with it. I mean, it's disturbing, but I think they're doing it tastefully, if that can be said. Like, you know,
It's not
the
seen, is it?
No.
no.
Oh, okay.
No, the lynching isn't. No.
Okay. Okay, I'm calm.
No, I'm saying the language.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Is as tastefully as it can be used. Like Marquis said, it's never appropriate, but when you're dealing with the historical context of it, I feel like there are those moments where it's like, I hate it, but like it's ragtime too. Like when you got
Yep.
Willie Conklin, you know, and it's just like you don't want to hear it, you don't want to say it, especially as an actor. I'm like, no, I don't ever want to play that part. You know, because it's just so, it doesn't ever sit right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one other thing, and then I'll let you guys keep talking. So specifically, right? I'm a black actor. For those of you who can't see me, I'm a full-on chocolate man, right? But I will say that Parade, again, my experience with the show, the director sat all of the people down, the cast, white, black, and everybody in between, and said, "Hey, here's the language. We have a choice, right? We cannot have those specific slurs put in and still kind of get the message across. But his vision, yeah, his vision was to lay it all out there, because this is what this is how it's written, and people need to hear it and see it. And so I appreciated having the choice, and it was a learning lesson for me as a person who now is directing shows and whatever else, to sit the cast down and sit everybody down and have a full like an honest and open discussion about what this is, what it means, are we comfortable, etc. Because you know you don't always have that.
Yeah. It helps, and that was another one of the problematic histories that showed up, was one, representing trauma on stage, because that's the big thing, about having people replay traumas. And I get it. So that was one of the issues. And then trauma told from a place of unknowing, though Jason Robert Brown confronted that 5 years later. And then there was one article that I found that had it labeled as it was a show with people of color telling white lies. I don't even know what that means. I read the article, and it said everything that we're talking about. So I'm not sure if it was just an angry person, or if it was clickbait to get you to click the link so that you could
So
understand it.
so I have possibly two thoughts about that, right? Well, one thought and then a totally separate thought. The probably the only thing that I could see about that statement that I'm trying to think about where this person's head might be. So throughout in the show, one of the main Black characters winds up, from what the audience can infer, making up a story so that Leo Frank, the main character, would be indicted and eventually convicted. So he makes up. So how am I saying
Is that Connolly?
Yes.
Okay.
So fast forward to 2019, 2021, a new article was written just recently that said that Jim Connolly might have actually been the murderer. Jim Connolly's Black.
Yes.
Right? So he might have actually been the murderer. So if you look back, and watch the show and listen to the music, it seems like Jim Connolly may be making up a story to get Leo Frank, the Jewish man, indicted and convicted. So that may be a white lie. I'm just trying to sort of wrap my head around it.
I believe in the show that he's coerced by the prosecutors,
yes.
prosecution, to like basically threatened with, he's like, so you skipped out on your whatever it was.
He's supposed to be in the chain gang, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You skipped out on it a couple months early, you know, that, and he's like, you know what that makes you? And Jim Connolly replies, I don't know, lucky?
Right.
Yep. And he says, no, it makes you an escaped convict. Do you think and it's inferred that, can you help us out that you can do this?
Yeah.
And
so maybe that, I don't know. Go ahead, B.
Oh, in the show, it's also shown that I think her name is Millie, their housekeeper, gives testimony that she retracts as well. Right. And so just about everyone that gave testimony retracted their testimony or changed the story later on for the governor.
So maybe this Black, the person who wrote this article or made this comment was mad that Black people were, I don't know, telling whatever it was they were telling. That's the only thing I can think of. But I did want to say, I wanted to say one other thing before I lose the thought. In the production that I did, and I think that this was a directorial decision,
okay,
but I don't know. At the very, very end of the show, Leo Frank is murdered, hanged. He is broken out of jail and hanged for the murder of Mary Fagan. And there's a song at the end of the show, and at the very, very end of the show, the director decided that all of the people, or half the men in the show, were going to put on KKK hoods, and they put on it on stage. This was like they're putting on, and I remember very specifically we had a conversation about that also, but because it was like hood, 3 seconds, blackout, and that was the end of the show. It was rough, and so our bodies were turned upstage as we watched this happen. I remember having to close my eyes because that was jarring for me. So going back to what you were saying about slurs and lynchings and racial things being
and
used
trauma.
for the sake of art, right? Particularly trauma. That was, even to this day, it was one of probably the hardest thing that I had to do on stage. One of the hardest things I've had to sort of endure on stage night after night. Because, you know, I think it would be hard for anybody, but particularly as a Black person. So I just wanted to make sure I said that.
B, you were getting ready to say something.
Yeah.
Sure. One of the other things, going back to the Black people telling white lies, one of the really interesting things about the South is that I'm a Yankee, so I still say they. We have stories that persist. And one of the stories that's really strong in Marietta and with the family is that Leo Frank did kill Mary.
Right.
So one of the responses could have been from people going, this is all lies. And like everyone is lying because Leo Frank really did it. He's not innocent like they're portraying. And there was an article talking about Uri, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he was approached by like great granddaughter or something.
Yeah, I have that quote.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. And she's like, you know, I really appreciate that you said nice things about my family, but we know Leo Frank killed her. And it's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it was at the celebration, as weird as this is, the centennial of the death of Leo Frank. They were
Right.
having a let me make sure I read it right. They were having a panel discussion seeking justice, Leo Frank case revisited. And after all of that, he was approached by, and let me get her name correct because I do believe she is still here.
You're very
Um,
quiet, Ricky.
oh, I'm very quiet. I'm sorry. Mary Fagan Keene is who
Mm,
walked up to him and said that. And exactly as B said it, she came up to me and said, some of this was very nice about my aunt, but I know Leo Frank killed her.
mm.
And it was like, imagine as producers putting on this great work about facts as they are illustrated, and then having, so yes, I can see where POCs telling white lies. I can see where that might come from someone that's on a different camp. So yes, that
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense. But that, see, B and I on the same level. We did the same research. I bet you we have the same slides.
So, no, are you going to ask another question, Ricky? I wanted
Oh,
to.
eventually, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I'm going back to why I love the show, right? Why I love the show. One of the things that, to me, is somewhat unique to the theatrical cosmos, right? That Parade is that you have um, at least two, if not more, um, marginalized communities pitted against each other, right? So you have Black people, you have presumably most of the people in Marietta who were factory workers and sort of this angry mob. They're probably poor, right, or not making a lot of money. And then you have Leo Frank and his family, Leo and
Lily,
what's his wife's name?
Lily, I think.
No, no.
Wait a minute, don't get me the
Um,
line.
Uh,
Hold on.
shoot, give me a second.
oh gosh,
I
it's
can
on the
pull it
tip of my.
up. Hold on. Wait a minute. Hold on. Where's the cast?
Lucille,
What is it?
Lucille,
Oh
Lucille.
yes,
Lucille.
Lucille. Yes, thank you, thank you. So
I was like,
Leo and Lucille, right? So
yeah.
they are Jewish, right? So you have two presumably marginalized communities pitted against each other in the South, and you don't often see that, right? Particularly in musicals, or in theater in general. And um, I think that it's very telling and very interesting that the playwright chose to highlight that specifically in a lot of different ways, but it also is just historically accurate. So I just wanted to put that out there because I wish more theater and more musicals would explore that also as well.
But here's the funny thing. It is out there. There's tons of theater that
Oh
speak
yeah.
to exactly what Parade does.
Hmm.
However, they're like 1938, 1928. And most theater companies don't look that far back. I know one director who loves that era, and I always choreograph or work with him on his things. But like A Thousand's Cheer, it's an old political musical.
Mm. Mm. What's it called?
Um, A Thousand's Cheer.
A Thousand's Cheer. Okay, I'll
Yeah,
write that down.
it's an old political musical that's pretty much talking about, I forgot which presidents it was at the time, but I wanted to do it when Obama was running for the first time,
Mm. Mm.
because the same type of conversations we were having when that was going on were the same types of conversations that were occurring in this musical that I think was from the 1920s, maybe early 1930s.
Hmm.
But theater companies were like, well, no, no one knows that. Because now, to get people into theaters, most of the time, theater companies are choosing known pieces. So if you choose something like A Thousand's Cheer, that would have been my grandparents
Mm.
that would know that.
Which is interesting because in both Parade and presumably A Thousand Cheer, the themes are relevant today. We still have marginalized communities going against each other to the detriment of the actual like betterment of each of those communities, and not just racial communities, but social communities. You got lesbians against gays, against transgenders. I mean, it's all sorts of stuff. So it's interesting that and unfortunate that the more of those types of shows aren't highlighted and people don't look back. I just wrote down A Thousand Street. I'm going to order the script right after we get off the line here.
That's if you can find out who has. Did I order it? Did I order it? I think I might have ordered it.
Hmm.
If you can't find it, I think I might have it in my list. But again, as we
Okay.
digress, as
Yeah.
we always do on this. I'm going to share my screen because you just gave me a good segue into the next part that I wanted to bring up. Oh, which one am I presenting? Okay, let's see. What do you see? Kent
Hmm.
State University? Okay. So, right before the pandemic, of all things, Kent State decided that they opened on my birthday in 2020. Um, but they decided that they were going to do a season of social justice, and Parade was one of the shows that they chose. And they actually did this whole thing, and we'll get to it, which is what I like about what I am finding that you can do with Parade is make it a platform for social justice discussions.
Yes.
So that much I do like about it. So what they did, um, the director had I can't say that word, statistics about lynchings, racial events, and legislation in the South. They were projected on the backdrop prior to the show.
Mm.
More were projected at the end in order to wrap things up. But that is definitely a way to, even with all the quote unquote issues that may exist within Parade itself as a story, they had a way to do it. And then he says he picked it because he thinks that the issues confronted in this are important and are relevant to the moment in which we find ourselves right now.
Mm.
And
Do you happen to know if they included the statistics in the playbill as well? Because people take that home.
I am not sure.
Mm.
However, um, and this will also be in the resource online, but they created a whole planning guide, which kind of explained everything they did with how they put this play together.
Mm. Mm.
And I loved it. And they created a parade study guide that in the director's note within the study guide, they invited the audience to like read it before the performance so they could have context regarding time period more. They had the explanations of anti-Semitism. All of that was in this, I think it's like a 20-page document, but they use this as a starting point for discussion for not only their students and their community, but for the community at large. And
Mm-hmm.
I completely just loved that whole concept of taking something that has such a raw edge to it from a social perspective and making it a point of these students at this college said, we're just not going to put on Parade. We're going to educate about the
Yep.
themes that it possesses. And
Right.
it kind of goes back to what I've said in many of my chats, do the work. So if you're
Right.
going to do a piece and change it or even do a historical piece, if you do the work behind it, like your director sitting you guys down and saying, we have choices about language. And I'm going to go out on a limb and said the same conversation was had about the hoods. Let's just say it did. I don't think it did, but let's just say it did.
Okay.
Just because of those those things are, I'm not going to say they're fine, but if you have the discussion, it brings, there's buy-in to what's
Mm.
happening.
Right. Right.
And at least you can choose to or choose not to. You know, if someone in your cast had said, okay, I can't watch that, then they're just not in that scene.
So, one, the conversation was not had in a way that gave us a choice about it, but it was at the beginning of the show. The director said, "This is what I'm planning to do," and there were two people, two black people. There were only black and white people in the show. I'll say it that way
Okay.
first. So two black people decided they couldn't do it, and one white person said, "I can't put this on. You can't ask me to. I just can't do it." And they wound up, all three of them wound up leaving the show, unfortunately. Or, I mean, it's, that's your choice.
Right.
That's that. Right? TJ, were you going to say something?
When you told me about that at first, it's not in the script, so that is definitely a choice
Mm-hmm.
that was made, and I don't think it's not a sensitive choice, and it's not I personally, I don't think it's a smart choice. Because that really just narrows it down to that this was a single incident done by the KKK, and it really was not. It's a
Right.
full town mob.
Yeah.
There's a picture in the book that I have of people celebrating in the streets in Marietta afterwards, and it's a full town. Like, it's not just a thing, and it's
So I should clarify just a little bit. I agree with
okay.
you, but I should clarify how it was presented. So throughout the show, there are many townspeople who wind up joining the fray of people who are angry about Leo Frank, and they are distinctive in the way that they are costumed. So at the end of the show, we know that those townspeople, they didn't join the KKK, but I guess I guess the idea was like, it was symbolic that these people are so racist that they sort of buy into the KKK ideals. And because it was so quick, the audience may or may not have gotten what the director was trying to say. I found it difficult as an actor to watch it, but I understood the choice. I thought it was it was just a directorial choice, just like anything else. So anyway, just wanted to say it was not just everybody had on KKK hoods. Like, there were
Yeah.
townspeople specifically that were joining into this.
And each person deals with different signifying moments within a
Yeah.
show, so like that differently. I remember earlier last year, or maybe in the middle of last year, there was a discussion that I started about, and then there were none, and
Mm.
a a group's choice to do, and I'm aware that that's one of their logos that they have out there on the web, the one with the noose, and I was like, no, no, yeah,
Mm.
see,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
just one of those things, and they were like, well, they weren't going to use the noose in the show. I was like, that wasn't the situation.
Right.
It was just different things trigger different people differently.
Mm-hmm.
So just like with the three, like, you did the show, but it was hard for you to watch. Three people left the show because it was something that they couldn't do. And that's kind of one of those like historical things about trauma. And it's just, yes, it's a directorial choice. Somebody would be like, I'm cool with it. You would not cool, but
I wasn't cool with it. Yeah.
I know, but just in
Yeah.
other words, you were able to do the show, and
Right.
then you have directors like TJ and audience members like myself, and I'm going to throw B in there, and if I am incorrect, just tell me I'm incorrect in this assumption. Like, people are going to deal with that in their own different ways, and just
Mhm.
from the perspective of from a director making that choice and understanding that it can go many different ways. And that's why I
Absolutely.
always tell people, no matter what you do, have a reason for it.
Right.
No one may ask you at that moment, but it could come up later. Henceforth, Jason Robert Brown having to not retract his original statement,
Certainly
but
clarified.
massage it,
Yeah.
yeah, clarified in a way of, now that I look back and
Mm-hmm.
I see things differently, yeah, maybe we wrote this from a perspective of unknowing
Mm-hmm.
the concept of what was going to happen.
I was, and just to piggyback off of that, just very quickly, I think that that's one of the things that myself and other people who write plays today are having to deal with. We are all supposed to be in a state of, for lack of a better term, hyper wokeness, right? You're supposed to be able to know every single sort of anticipate what might happen 5, 10 years from now, but it's very hard to do. And then you sort of get stuck with it and not want to say anything because you don't want to say the wrong thing. So it can be very difficult.
To further on that, like when you're in it and you're working on it, you're not necessarily thinking about that. But once you remove yourself from the project, like he did for 5 years, and look back on it, you get a whole new perspective from it. And I'm sure he couldn't do that in the process because you're on a track to Broadway. So you've got to get this done now and just go. So you have blinders on and you are just writing and doing what you think is right at the time. And then, as Marquis said earlier, you know, you revisit it later, and you're like, that's kind of a product of the time for sure. You know.
Yeah. I feel like B was going to say something. Were you going to say something?
Okay. Yeah. So we're talking about context on how to put a show on, and this has to me with this show you have to take a lot of care. So I watched the musical for the first time yesterday. I watched the concert version, and I knew one song, and that song was the Red Hills of Home, because in, I think it was 2018, they did a reenactment of the burning of Marietta, and they played that song.
Oh, wow.
And and they didn't play the whole thing, but they played like the patriotic bits.
Yeah.
And so it reads so differently depending on, and like musically, in a musical, it's obvious, like whenever you hear the old Southern stuff, it's very discordant and it's like very isolating to Leo and his wife, and like it makes sense within the musical, but knowing that it can get so yanked out of context, and knowing that you have strong character, the white supremacist in here is an incredibly strong character, and that's questionable, because it's like, okay, sure, we know those people as pundits a lot of times, you know, we know those people as loudmouths, and they're gonna seem strong. You're gonna have to really think about how you portray that. Because people can take the message that, oh yeah, we won, you know, it's a big thing here, you know, people can take it from an evangelical standpoint. And so it feels like there's a lot of careful planning. The KKK masks, or the hoods rather. So one of the historical things about this is it created a resurgence of the KKK in Georgia. This incident with Leo Frank. But even like, I can't even imagine using the rebel flag on like stage.
And that is in a lot. When I looked through the pictures, I was like,
oh yeah.
Okay.
But that's so, and again, we were talking about trigger points, and it's so like, it just yanks the message. Like the KKK hoods just yanks the message to the side.
Yeah. And so very quickly, one of the things that I sometimes think about, particularly when I did some research, but I started looking through, as you all did, pictures of the show online, etc. Almost in 90% of the instances, you see a sea of white faces, right? And then you see like the 3 black characters, right? Or however many there are, just a couple
or
of
in
them. Or in
Ford's case, 2.
Right.
2.
Wow. And so I think it'd be very interesting. I often think about, like, I'm sure there were more than 2 or 3 black people in this show, townspeople specifically. So if you had 50% or 60% of the townspeople be black or people of color, how would that change the message? I don't think it would at all. There were certainly a lot of black folks who were like, hang this white man, Jewish or not, I don't care. But you don't see a lot of that. So it winds up being, going back to what you were saying about yanking the message, it winds up being pinned on a bunch of racist white folks. And there's a bunch of racist black folks here too, who were, you know, ginning it up also. They were also part of this angry mob. So I just wanted to say that because it's something that that I thought about.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a show. Let's just say if someone said, Ricky, you must pick a show that features trauma, so I would have Parade, and then there would be Ragtime,
Mm,
which also does, and then you have Miss Saigon for
mm,
me, and
mhm,
then you have King and I.
mm,
I'm sure there are others, but foreknown for those that would be listening, those would be the ones, and it would be like, well, which ones would I pick? And I was kind of explaining, you know, what we were doing today to my husband. He was like, okay, so he was like, yeah, I know Ragtime. For me, Ragtime has joy mixed in it at the end because they come together.
yeah,
The other ones do not. So if
mm,
I had to pick, as much as, I mean, I'm a fan of Ragtime, but not a fan. If like capital A, I'm a small A fan,
mhm,
not a big A fan. Um, but there's, this whole conversation of joy, even though there's trauma. And again, it was written for the time for that specific piece. But if I had to pick one, I'm not sure the other three would go above Ragtime just because Ragtime has a touch of joy. But that's only if I'm forced to do what I'm calling a trauma play. Yes.
So I have a counterpoint, right? This is my counterpoint. So as a consumer of art, as a person who watches and sees all sorts of plays and movies and music, I am a big fan. I am a capital A fan of joy. Right? I love, even if joy has to be mixed into trauma. Right? I love
Yeah.
seeing either a happy ending or a peaceful ending. Something. The only thing, the only sort of possibly peaceful thing about the way that Parade ends is that Lucille and Leo come to sort of peace with, well, this is what happened, right? That's and I'll see you in heaven,
Oh,
right?
I was going to
That's
say, Leo's dead. How did
no,
he
he's
have
dead,
no?
right? So Leo sings a touching song and Lucille sort of joins in. It's like, I'll see
Prior
you
to him being lynched.
basically, or
Is
Okay.
this all the
just
wasted time?
no, that's after. I'm talking about Shema at the very very end.
Oh, the prayer.
Yeah, the prayer. Yes. So, but I think that my counterpoint to having joy in traumatic plays, particularly, there are some exceptions, and I think that when you're talking about a show like Parade that is dealing with themes that are still relevant today, I
Hmm.
think if you put joy into it, it sort of gives the lessons the impact of, no, this is still happening today. We're not just telling you this story to let you know of something that happened back then. No, this is still happening today. So let's not have a brand new day at the end. But no, this is still
The one.
this is still happening, and you should be upset about it. So that's
No,
that's why I think,
no, I get you on that, and I can
yeah,
agree with you on that, which is why I would put in context Parade. uh, All four that I mentioned, I would put them in the context of social change, educational theater, is
yes,
where I would put it versus, people like, we're we're having a season of uplifting Parade. Okay, where?
oh no, no,
Where?
no, no,
Mm,
no,
Where?
no.
Wait,
No, but I've seen when, and I always tell people, when you start naming your seasons, be careful of the shows that you put in them, because if it's a season of exploration, okay,
Mm.
season of joy, season of fun, season of history, like, find something that can have a streamline. But I have actually seen Parade listed in seasons of joy, and
What?
because their thought is, we are celebrating Parade. I get celebrating it as a show, but do you understand? Stop looking
Mm.
around. It's not going to make any sense no matter whether you look left, right,
Like
up, or
I'm
down.
like, what?
I just don't. I mean, when I went to go see it, I saw it for the first time at Ford's Theater with their production, and I went into it completely blind. I didn't know anything about the show, context. I was like, parade, cool, this should be fun. Because the name is fun. The name suggests
It does.
community coming together and celebrating.
Yeah.
And I never put it that this could be a marker year after year after year, the specific parade of this trauma that happened. And it just, I walked out of there and my mind was like, what? A poorly named show. But it was amazing. Like, that was my first thought. I turned to Lauren and I was like, that was amazing and so poorly named. Like, I don't know, I kind of want to walk in knowing what it's about, but it's not uplifting at all. But the title might suggest that. I don't know. It's a good dissonance, maybe.
Yeah.
It does bear the. I've had this discussion with people, even though it was about new works, not old works, because you can't really go back and change the name of Parade the musical. It is what it is. But with new works, I've seen shows where they're like, oh, we're talking about, the light in the closet, and I'm like, okay, well, what is this going to be about? And then next thing you know, you're talking about some genetic disfiguring. I'm like, okay, somehow the light in the closet doesn't match. So it's like, I see where the discord in the parade, which seems joyous, we're all out there.
No, but the people who believe that this is still to be celebrated year after year, they're still that's a parade for them. It's it's, I don't.
What is the celebration though?
Yes, B.
Okay. I would say I have a question for this as well. So, Confederate Memorial Day, the name, was abolished in 2015. It is now just a state holiday in Georgia. It is still an actual holiday on the books in other states, but in Georgia, it is just a state holiday, generic state holiday. So my question about this is, what in the message would change if you did it as a modern production instead of a 1914 production or a 1900s production? Because this is something that is still celebrated in many places in the South.
When you say what would change, right, as a modern production, you meaning,
like, would it change?
How would it be staged differently? Is that what you're asking? Or
no, I'm thinking of, like, would it change the message too much, or would it bring the message home because this is still going on?
I think that it would bring the message home, that because it's still going on. And I think that if you looked at this show, if it was put on today and staged in such a way that people were educated in a different way, to be like, oh wait, this is still a thing. This is still something that people are doing. Kind of
like what Kent State did when they were showing all the statistics. Yeah. So if this were to be done today and you were to do the statistics and put it in the program, I agree with you on that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
You would literally have Eric Garner. You would have Aubrey. You would have Floyd.
Tamir Rice.
You would have
right.
Trayvon. You would have, is it Tiana? No.
Breonna Taylor?
Breonna. I knew it was Iana.
Yeah.
But you would have all of those plus many more, but you would have such a listing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm doing that similarly with the Mountaintop, just literally the flood of information that kind of comes back, so that yes, you're watching a historical piece, but the messaging is still very present today. So I have to give Kent State kudos for doing that in 2020. That was actually, I hadn't even thought of that in context until I just said that. Yes, TJ.
Question with with what you said, with the question, do you mean like staging it in modern apparel as if this was an occurrence that happened last year? Okay.
Well, yeah.
I mean, yeah. Like,
the odd thing about it is, depending on which production you watch, a lot of the the governors and the lawyers and things, they could be on TV today. They look exactly the same.
yes.
They sound exactly the same. So that there's no difference there already. But,
Yeah, I don't think you'd have to change the script much in order to actually adapt it realistically for a modern time.
No, I agree.
There's a few small things that you might have to do, with just a couple lines or maybe even a character or two.
I think that.
Otherwise,
Oh
yeah.
no, go ahead. No,
I
I was
said
just gonna.
otherwise, yeah. Go ahead.
No, so very quickly, I was just gonna say that I think that probably one of the biggest changes or the biggest things that you would have to manage around is the presence of social media. And maybe you full on go into it, right, and say this is how much worse it got because people were social media and it was all over Facebook, it was all over, or the other side of it is that why weren't there video cameras? Why didn't anybody see who murdered this girl? So you would have to sort of manage that in some kind of way. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think so. I think it's handled in with when you're dealing with a reporter, Mr. Craig.
Yeah.
I mean, they in the licensed production now, the song "Real Big News,"
Real Big News, yeah.
In the original production has a slower, sarcastic approach to news, like it's slow, I have nothing to do, and then as soon as the story breaks,
Right.
he sings this jazzed up,
Joyous,
like "Yay, I have a story I can tell."
Yeah.
And he goes and he's throughout the entire thing he's like, "Tell me about it," and they're like, "Well, I saw Leo do this and I saw Leo do this," and that's just you look on these, that is the comments of every stupid politician's page. You've got, they post something, everybody, you got 400 comments that are all saying stupid stuff, and I don't read the comments, just don't read the comments. But it's interesting because with the licensed version, that first Real Big News is optional.
Big News and then Real Big News, right? So
yeah, Big News is optional, and then Real Big News is the celebration, and that's it still in the show. They have it in the appendix, and they're like, we feel like this isn't needed, but if you want to use it, go ahead, which I'm like, great. But you could definitely, like, that's social media right there when he's going through, you can throw up somebody's TikTok up there and having their thing, and then another Instagram post over there. I think it could be handled very well in there. Especially they got reporters later on in the show that are all like hounding Lucille Frank, and she's like, leave me alone, you don't know that, and then sings "You Don't Know This Man." And that's right there. That's a blatant, like, hey, I'm going to post because y'all don't know what you're talking about.
So I just wanted to say one other thing. I know we're running over time, but one other thing that might be problematic to answer B's question, or it's not even necessarily problematic, just something you would have to think through, is right now in 2021, the focus for many theaters and many sort of theater goers across the country is people of color, right? People of color specifically and their stories, right? And if not people of color, then marginalized communities, particularly LGBT folks, right? And Jewish people are seen as white or white passing or what have you. And I think that to have a show focus on Leo Frank, who by all accounts is a white man, right? Depending on how you want to look at it, etc., it might be like, well, what the hell is this theater doing when they could be doing something else that's more about a person of color? And I think I know that the themes are tied, and of course, if once you watch it, you're like, oh, of course, this is the same. But I think that specifically would be something that people would be like, you're talking about Leo Frank, you could have done, I don't know, whatever other person of color show that has a similar message.
Now, taking this with a slightly left turn, could you do this production and cast an African American man in that role as Leo Frank?
No, because it's based on an actual historical piece, and it just wouldn't.
Okay.
I don't think that people would go back and look at it and be like, why did you cast this black man as Leo Frank?
Well, let me challenge you on 2 occasions.
There could be a black Jew, certainly, but go ahead.
No, it has nothing to do with the Jewish side of things.
Mm.
Take the Jew out. That did not sound right, and I admit that openly.
Listen,
So,
are you part of the parade? Are you auditioning for parade right now?
no,
Take the
no.
Jew out.
So
Oh,
I'm going to challenge that on two accounts. So one account, why did it just leave my head? And that leaves me with the second account, which everyone's going to jump on the bandwagon of, oh, you brought that up. What was my other account? Crap, it went away. Okay, so I'll go with my second account.
Okay.
Um, oh no, I remember. TJ told me. It's there. So 1776 has been done with all women.
Mm.
They're playing the roles because they're just telling the stories of the characters that they are playing. They're not embodying the characters. And 1776 has been done with people of color playing those main roles. Also with assassins.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was
then
an
you
assassin.
have, yeah, but then you also have Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, George Washington has never been anything other than a white man. But the black man playing him on Broadway. That's a totally
But
different
but
story.
but the thing about those shows, to my mind, and I could be off base, is that most of the focus, most of the theme, most of the story that is being told of those stories has to do with historical instances that are less to do with the person's race and more to do about the politics or the things that went on in between it. And so in Parade
Okay.
specifically, it's about Leo being Jewish that causes a lot of this mishigosh that goes on. And so I just think it would be very difficult. I mean, that's
I,
just me.
I, for me, I think having that role, being able to be cast as anybody, they can still present as Jewish. I think you run into problems if you start replacing Jim Conley or Minnie with white actors or other actors, because I don't know, it feels like punching down, if that makes sense.
So the thing is that it's an interesting thing. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know that I necessarily agree, because
Sure.
now we're saying that white actors can be replaced by people of color, but people of color actors can't be replaced. It can't be replaced by white people. That's what
That
you're saying,
statement is out there, and it's
and
depending on the
I don't know if I
circumstance,
I,
necessarily agree
it's
with that.
valid and invalid.
Mm.
That's all I'm gonna say. It's valid
Uh,
and invalid.
That's a whole different discussion for a whole
It
different
is.
call.
it is, that's another hour-long
Yeah,
conversation,
yeah.
honestly. No, I feel you. I think that, yeah, I think because he is so targeted and the story is so, the prosecution like does everything that twists all of these facts against him. It still rings relevant. And for for those, but have it like, if you opened up Act Two and some of those the characters that are singing Rumbling and Rolling
Mhm.
are white.
No, that would be awful.
No,
No.
exactly, and that's the thing, is it's written. I mean, I'd have to go through and reread the script, but in order to make sure that it's written that you could do it that way,
Well, so the
because
other thing, I was just going to say, the other thing is that at least in the production that I was in and the one that I've seen, Leo and Lucille talk about certain Jewish holidays. They practice certain Jewish customs that may not read the same way if it was a black man playing this, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if you were to cast a black man as Leo Frank, you would have to cast the opposite of for Jim Conley. It couldn't be all black, otherwise it would not be good at all. It just wouldn't make sense. B, were you going to say something? Oh, okay. B's just listening. She's nodding
Thank
and
you.
sort of. It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
No, but that's also why I have these conversations, just because you never know. The one person that might come to the website and say, "Okay, what are they going to do with Parade?" and they watch it and they go, "Oh,
Right.
okay." And I
Right.
mean, Might that happen? You don't know. But at least now they have a platform of discussion of which to kind of base things on. And it's one of those things that, I keep saying to different things because, Marquis, you've been in shows where I will cast out of type. You were in
Certainly.
August Osage, 100% out of type of the way that show should have been.
Sure.
But it's having a reason behind why you're doing what you're doing. And it doesn't have to be right or wrong, but you have your reasonings.
Yeah.
And be able to stand behind it and have your cast and production teams and theater companies support you in that.
Yep.
And just be willing to deal with whatever socially comes based on your choices.
Yep.
And I love that we're having the conversations just about different things.
So I know we're running over time. I just wanted to say one other thing, and I already said it, but I just wanted to say it more explicitly. Shows like Parade, to my mind, and one of the reasons that I love the show. Sometimes I watch a show and I'm like, oh, that was a good show as well. It was put on well, and the acting was great, and it gives me some ideas about staging. But this show in particular, I hope inspires other people to write creatively about historical pieces and not be afraid of race. And particularly when it comes to musicals, it's okay to write a musical about something dark and racial. It's totally fine if you can pull it off, but don't shy away from it. And I hope that shows like Parade and what was the other one? What was it?
A Thousand's Cheer.
A Thousand's Cheer. I hope those shows will do that for folks going forward. And I highly recommend anybody watching this, go watch Parade, figure out how to see it, listen to the soundtrack.
Ricky, what was it we saw at Signature? Was it Scottsboro? Is it Scottsboro Boys?
Scottsboro Boys.
Yeah, that embraces what you're saying right there.
Write it down. Write it down.
I'm writing it down right now.
Scottsboro Boys.
That's what you're looking for right there.
Yep.
Yes, it is. It's a show that will pull you in and just envelop you. And Felicia Curry can do no wrong. That I will say that until the day I don't breathe. For someone who only said one thing, rocked the entire show. Rocked it.
Yep.
Okay.
On stage the whole time, said one thing, but acted the ceiling down to the floor. Just yes, really good show. So with that, before we go, I just want to thank B and Marquis and TJ because we are now considering Parade, by all intents purposes, reclaimed. So I thank you all and kudos.
All right.
Thank you.